Hello everyone and welcome to today's episode of Path, Passion, Purpose by Dianes. We are at the von Bartha Gallery in Basel and I have the pleasure to actually interview today Stefan von Bartha. Welcome, Stefan.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here.
So today we're going to dive into the topics of this podcast, Path, Passion, Purpose. But when I thought about this interview, I realized you actually tick many of our boxes of the people who we try to interview.
Lucky me.
You're next gen, so this is one of the oldest family-owned galleries in Europe, and you're the second generation to take over. If I may say so, you're somewhat of an entrepreneur because you're bringing new galleries, like for example Copenhagen, and new concepts to what was already done by your parents.
Mm-hmm.
You are obviously in the creative industry too, and I believe with what you're doing, you're also trying to create impact and actually more awareness about certain topics, because I know I've seen the art you represent at Art Basel, for example, and I always find it connects to Diane's main topics in a way. So if I may ask, the first question is really like, how did you end up here? How did we end up both here? Like, what was your path to get here?
I would say that, like most of these stories, especially when a company is family run and the next generation takes over, initially the idea was completely the opposite. So, of course, when I grew up, I was very happy to grow up in a gallery because my parents were living, or we all grew up in the building where the gallery used to be housed. Which was a fantastic way, of having artists coming by, having openings, having a lot of things that are way more interesting than going to school or being focused on school. But I never felt that I would take over. So my interest first was based around vintage design. So I worked with that. I started already with 16 to do my first exhibition and stuff like that. So there was a certain connection, but I wanted to go my own path. But with 22 or 23, I realized that my passion for art and my interest for art, but also going to a museum and enjoying to look at an exhibition was the thing that I felt the most driven by, or felt like that interests me the most, or I felt also the most comfortable. So I then decided to kind of like get into the field of art with really the focus on taking over the family business at one point. But it was, like always, it wasn't easy. It's people always imagine because you are the next generation, it's a quite straightforward transaction, so to say. That was not the case. I really first had to learn to see the art world from different perspectives, not only from the way that my parents were operating their galleries. So I worked for other galleries. I did Christie's Education in New York. I did shows in London. I did projects all over the world a little bit, and then I came back to Basel to face the idea of taking over the gallery. And what we did in our particular case is that I first worked for my parents to really get to understand it and to bring my input to the table, and to also find this building and to acquire the building, to renovate it, and then start kind of changing what the gallery is doing today. And then 8 years ago, I officially then took over.
So what was your first job then working for your parents?
Yeah, what was my first job? Gosh, I can't really remember. No, I think in the beginning, when I came back to Basel in 2006, I was kind of like trying to lead a little bit more the contemporary program, or the contemporary part of the program. But I was in the beginning very focused on this building, finding the building, renovating the building, and then building a program around it. And also, going through the artist list, because the gallery has a big heritage with more historical positions. The gallery has always shown contemporary art. The first exhibition my parents did was a living artist. But the gallery, especially in the 80s and 90s, was very much known for more the historical pieces. So my job was really, in the beginning, to change that narrative, but also to create an understanding that the gallery has always been a gallery for contemporary and modern art. And I think in our particular case, I remember that even with art fairs or with art organizations, it was always a bit of a debate. Okay, what are you doing? Are you now doing modern art or contemporary art? If you look at the gallery scene today, there used to be, up to like 10 years ago, you had a lot of galleries doing strictly contemporary. All of them started to work with modern artists, mostly because of financial reasons. So our model was always there, and a lot of people copied us. But I think I take that as a compliment.
It is a compliment. So yesterday we did learning experience, what we call a dance, with a very renowned and amazing human being, Christian Busch, on the science of serendipity. And if you look back, what were kind of the milestones which defined that you decided this is what you're really passionate about, this is what you want to do with your life? Because as you said, like in the beginning, it wasn't given you wanted to go in this space and be where you're today, right? So what were kind of the milestones, or what were the serendipitous moments which led to you saying, you know what, this is what I at least want to give a try, or this is the reason why, this is my why?
I think there were, like, for me, there's maybe two moments, two very personal moments. One was that when I did crisis education in New York, I was personally in a very bad place. I did the whole classical thing, just had a major breakup, all of these cliches. And I remember arriving in New York, and I would say that, of course, everyone is super excited to go to a city like that. I wasn't. I was homesick, I was in a crisis, I didn't feel well. And I remember that I went to Starbucks, which at that time was a big thing in New York, completely lost. I think I wanted to get an espresso and a croissant. I walked out with a milkshake and a muffin because I couldn't speak the language of the Starbucks speed, it was. And then I decided to go to the Guggenheim Museum. And there was an exhibition, a curated exhibition, a group show at the Guggenheim. And I remember feeling I was really not in a good place. And I walked through the exhibition and I looked at all of these artworks, and there were so many artists that I knew about. And I started to really spend, I think, 2.5, 3 hours in that museum. And I remember walking out of the museum and I felt so good. And I was just like, wow, so this really does something for me, going to a museum, looking at artworks. It sounds very dramatic now, but it was really for me a moment where I felt like, okay, yeah, this is really, I'm so interested in that. And the other thing is that I think the way that I grew up, I was always good in entertaining people, but that is also something that quite a lot of people that are a little bit insecure do. And I always felt insecure in the fact of, like, you seeing your friends that become architects or bankers or all of these things you do in Switzerland. And I really didn't see myself doing that, or I didn't feel like I could do it in the way I would want to do it, or it wouldn't fulfill me. And I felt like, okay, if you talk with me about art, or you talk with me about what we do or what my interests are, this is where I feel very confident. This is where I feel at home. So I more and more realized, like, okay, if I want to do something, I mean, I always say sometimes that, you can attack me wherever you want, but in here, it's just like, this is my safe zone. This is where I feel at home. This is where I feel like, okay, I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm doing. Certainly people that disagree with that, but I feel very confident in that while I'm here. And this is why I decided, okay, this is my safety place.
When you said it was dramatic, I can actually completely relate to that. Because, I lived in Paris at some point, and whenever I felt lost, I would go to the Museum of Rodin or like Orsay, and walking around, I would come out a different person. It would put things into perspective. Somehow, like the fact that art survives times and survives your whatever heartbreak at that moment or whatever you're feeling, it survives it. It's like nature. It puts things into perspective and longevity. So I can actually really relate to the fact that if you don't feel well when you look at art, it actually uplifts you. For me, it's always about the longevity part.
But you can also feel well and look at art and even feel better. But I think this is also why, there's a lot of conversation, what are galleries for, and why do we need museums? In the public...
What's your opinion?
They're tremendously important. Art is culture, and culture is what we all live from. And I think that it is interesting to see that, especially in the public conversation, very often, things are being debated about why do museums need more budget, why do museums get so much budget, or why do they need a new building, etc., etc. But if you then see how many people go to the museum and, I don't know, they like the show or they don't like the show, but they create opinions, they have feelings, something happens. And we also saw it, like, for example, at the last opening we had here at the gallery, we had over 300 visitors for an opening, which is a lot, So you can see that people are really interested in culture, and they want to see what is happening here, and they want to experience that, and they want to talk about art. And I think that's a very, very important part of of what we do. And I think a world without art would be, yeah, it's just a no-go. It doesn't work.
So a world without art, that goes towards the impact you might want to have with your work. Like, what kind of impact are you trying to create, whether it's through your artists or through the company, so to speak, you're building? What do you want to leave behind? How do you want to motivate others or empower others? Because I've seen what you do, and I think like that's part of your vision. It's not something you don't think about. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
There's two aspects to it. One is that, a vision that you have is always changing. Mm-hmm. That is a thing that I learned from my parents. My father was once asked in an interview, what is the success of the gallery? And he said that my mother and he were able to redefine the job of the gallery every 5 till 6 years. Mm-hmm. And that was something that is very much driving us. So of course we have a mission statement, or we have an idea what we want to do, but it is changing. It's a fluid concept. But it is for me important that, also I worked for different galleries. I have a very good insight of what the art world is. Mm-hmm. I see and hear a lot of people that work at art-related places and are not happy with the environment. Mm-hmm. You hear all of these stories from artists that don't get paid and all of this, let's call it like unfairness that you see in the art world. Mm-hmm. And we want to be absolutely the opposite. Of course, that sounds now super beautiful, but it is the thing that drives us to be unique. Mm-hmm. And there's a person that always does this other kind of like podcast where she asks gallerists in their booth, what is the gallery about? And I think in our case, it would be like, it is about art. And I think you should also leave it there, because everyone tries to explain, and then it's this and it's that, and we want to change the world, or we want to give artists a home. Yeah, we want to do all of that, but it is really about art, and we care about art. We also, as a family, all of the artists that we exhibit, we also collect if we can afford. It's not like we can buy every artwork, not at all, but it is really important for us that we would never exhibit something that we don't believe in ourselves, or that we don't want to have on our own walls at home. And also creating a working place, but also a place for our artists and our team where ethics play a very, very big role. That's important for us. So in our particular case, we introduced a lot of things that you won't find in other galleries, or in most of the other galleries. The team is writing up the working hours, and you get reimbursed for your extra hours with more holidays and so on. A lot of little things, when we travel, we all travel the same way. It's not like I would, be upgraded to business class and the other ones fly economy. We stay in the same hotel. It is a very open place. I mean, we've learned a lot from also negative experiences in the past. Mm-hmm. We also did mistakes. We know that not everything we did in the past was perfect, but we took a lot from that. We learned a lot from it. We have a very open conversation with our artists, with our team, about what we can improve. It's a very open place to also, or you're very much allowed, or you're being reinforced to also criticize things, And I think this is very important for us, and I think, mm-hmm. Also someone that's working in our team, and I think she's also reflecting that, and really being a place where this kind of like family concept plays a big role. I mean, half of the team are people that I know since over 10 years, people like Caroline or Mamie and so on, which are also private friends since over 20 years, So it's a different kind of style and also different ethics that we'd like to bring to the table.
And I 100% believe in that, because not just of the one human we share in common, who's also a dance member, but through her and through your eyes, I see that what you're saying now is actually true. And I think that's so important. You mentioned before, if I may ask, that you select certain artists and certain values in the company. What's your selection criteria, if I may ask, or like how do you decide who comes in and what you do, whether it's an artist or within the team? Is it inside, or is it something that like you've defined as a family?
Both. Talking about the art, for me, the artists that we're representing are artists that we discover and that we also want to collect. Mm-hmm. As I said before, that's the driving force for us. There needs to be something that fascinates us. I remember that when we discovered Francisco Sierra, for example, it was a little exhibition. We saw a little piece. My today wife Hester took me to that exhibition during Art Basel. I then met the artist a year later, was making a rude joke about the fact that he doesn't have a gallery, and he told me afterwards that he was very offended, and I was super sorry. So to apologize, I invited him for dinner, and it became one of the most fascinating conversations about art. So I decided, okay, come on, let's go check out the studio, and I was completely blown away. And then we had to convince a little bit also the team, because it's such a different artist within the rest of the program at that time. And it led to us representing the artist, because everyone got excited about it. Now we're going to announce that we're going to start working with Carolina Chante as well as the Ted Stem Estate. Those are things that, been in the making for quite a while. But those are both artists that we just, if I could, I would love to own a number of works from both of these artists. So there's a personal fascination, but it's also important that the entire team is happy with it. We would not start working with an artist that the team doesn't feel comfortable with. And another very important factor is meeting the artist in person. Of course, the work is the main thing that you see in public. The person behind it is very important to us. We cannot work with artists that don't respect the team, or that have an attitude, or that don't cherish the values that we cherish. I think especially today, especially in the environment today, and especially with all of these important topics that should have been addressed 100 years ago, but it took a little bit longer. Unfortunately, it is very important for us to be on the same page. And this involves a lot of conversation. Also, if you work with someone since 10, 20 years, you always need to go back and really talk about, okay, are we on the same page? If not, it's very much like a relationship. You have your ups and downs. Talking about the team, of course, there's a lot the gut feeling, but we have a team which I feel like has such a strong aura. And I would say that the last Christmas dinner, before we all got terribly drunk, you could see, and it got much better when we were terribly drunk, which is also a very important sign. But before that, the energy was amazing, and everyone was happy to see each other, and that's super important for us. We're very sensitive about the atmosphere within the team. Sometimes I get told that I ask too often, how are you? Or is everything okay? But I don't know. I've worked at places where there's this terrible word which is called toxic. I find it's being used maybe sometimes a little bit too often, but in that context it works. We've been at places where you could see that the working environment was toxic. And there's this terrible cliche of art galleries that you have the gallerist, and then you have the team that fears, the outburst and what is now going to happen next. And I've been at places like that, and I highly disagree with that attitude, and I don't think it is a concept for the future. And there's a lot of galleries that work with artists that are still in these times thinking that they can say things or have an attitude or address topics that it's no longer okay. So I'm very much against that, and we really try to do it differently.
I really respect that.
Thank you very much.
I think it's so important. The ecosystem you create around yourself, it's a whole ecosystem, right? So there's so many moving parts and so many stakeholders, and all stakeholders should be considered and included and respected. So, it starts with a negative tone, but that's not where I want to get to. But sometimes the art world, to someone who may be a bit younger and watching, so just got out of high school, for example, and was maybe the parents even collectors, but what is this world, Or someone who actually loves art but doesn't understand what's going on in this whole art puzzle almost, right? It can seem very opaque, right? How would you if there's a couple of recommendations you could give to anybody who may be more of a newcomer to this, to navigate the space and to understand the space and to understand what are the galleries or what are the artists I should engage in, what's the right time to engage in? What would be your advice for someone new to actually engage in the space and become passionate about it?
We have a lot of young people who ask us exactly that question. I think what is important to see here is that go and look at as many shows as you can, because it is important to get your own view on things and to create your own opinion. Problem with the art world, and also with the negative aspect of the art world, that it's an incredibly money-driven business. When I walk into galleries, let's say like in one of those big art capitals, and you go and look at 5 or 10 galleries in a row, I'm always super surprised and also a little bit fed up with the attitude that people have when you walk into a gallery. I mean, they scan you, they look if you look like money or not, and mostly they're not interested in telling you much about the show. So in our case, where we also have this, unfortunately, a little bit typical setup of having a front desk. Now you don't see it because we packed it up, because we created a different kind of atmosphere in this show. But normally when you come to our gallery, we also have this huge front desk where people hide behind the Berlin Wall. But we didn't change it, for example, that when someone walks in, the people, the staff, the team, I don't like the word staff, the team really gets up to greet you, and you'll be asked, would you like to get a tour? Would you like to see something particular? Can I help you with anything? Because I think it's very important to do that. You don't have that in many galleries, but I think you need to just ignore that and look at as many shows as you can to get a bit of an idea what you like. I think that it is always good to have a gallerist that you trust. I would suggest, and we're saying that to many people, to have 2 or 3 gallerists that you trust to have a conversation. Because every gallerist in most cases will be very selfish and will tell you like, it's of course my gallery has of course the best artist and this is upcoming and so on. And I would really advise everyone to take a little bit more time to make decisions. The art world benefits a little bit from this narrative that has been created around the press, where Art Basel is a very good example. The quality of art, talking about the press, which I highly respect, and we need press, we live from press, but very often the press defines the quality of an artwork by the speed that it gets sold. And I think this is a very big problem, because people feel like if they go to Art Basel on Saturday and Sunday, there's nothing to buy. It's like, no, there's about 25,000 artworks that you can still acquire. So it's not like there's nothing to buy. And an artwork, just because it hasn't been sold at the opening day, is still a very good artwork. So really take the time to look at things, engage in conversations, trust the artist if you can, meet the artist that you're interested in. And I, for example, now recently had a wonderful conversation with a couple about Marina Adams, and it was going back and forth. And after months and months of conversation, they then decided to go for a painting by her at our gallery, and had another couple that we spoke with for a very long time, and they actually said that they're very sorry, but there's another gallery which has exactly the painting by her that they like. And I said, yeah, but then buy it, in the end it's good for the artist, and we believe in the artist, so we can't say like, oh no, don't buy it at the other gallery because ours are better. They're not, it's the same artist. So I think it's very important to have 2 or 3 galleries, to take your time, go and see shows, and trust in your personal opinion, and don't buy art with your ears, also use your eyes.
Yes, thank you for that. And I can really attest to what you're saying, because I remember when I first, again, in my 20s, after school, etc., started getting involved in art more, and I know what you mean with the desks, and I know what you mean during Art Basel. But what I can say to you is like, there's hasn't been one time where I haven't come to your booth, your gallery, run into you at the random other show, or brought people with me, up to 10, 20, where you haven't literally taken the time to be kind, and everybody in your team, to be kind and welcoming and highly respectful, irrespective of how the person looks like, whether they're 20 or 60, where you haven't made me and everybody else felt extremely welcome. It's like, when we are at Art Basel, we dine, it's like one of the favorite things for me personally has been, and that's why it's like consistently on the agenda, is like starting the day with, from Bartha and with you, because you said such a positive vibe.
Thank you very much.
No, but it's true, which is what I try to give to the community. So art doesn't need to be necessarily so complex, even at a huge thing like Art Basel, where it's like so much going on and so many different like themes, topics, galleries. But this welcoming kind of like, let's explore and learn together, and let's engage together, and let's just have a conversation. And it's a new feeling. I think what you're creating is also a new feeling. And so I can really attest to what you're doing because I've experienced it now so many times. And with that, I would like to thank you for that, but also thank you for today taking the time, welcoming us here in Basel.
Always.
Maybe a different day we do it at one of the other galleries you have. And just thank you, Stefan, and thank you for being so authentic and sharing with us.
Thank you very much, and thanks for this compliment, which I will of course share with the team.